Hey, everybody. Oxytocin. What is that exactly? What is it involved and who is really affected by the oxytocin? We are in a series and we're going to learn about oxytocin and how and who's affected. So, you ready? Let's go. Hey, everybody. Good evening, good evening, good evening. It might be morning in some parts of the world. Welcome to Let's Talk About It with Wanda, where we have wonderful discussions here. Rather, it's mind, body, and soul, health, relationships, religion, business, whatever it is, we have amazing discussions on Let's Talk About It with Wanda. And today we have the amazing Dr. Matthis, who is with us to continue our series on oxytocin. That's right, it's a series. So for the next week or so, this Sunday and the following Sunday, we are going to be talking about oxytocin. Why? Because this is the time of year where you see it active the most. You know, we used to call it less Netflix and chill. This is the time of year where people start to get hooked up and they stay together until maybe the day after Valentine's Day. You've seen it, you've experienced, you know somebody who's gone through it. And so we are going to break it down in these next 2 weeks what oxytocin is, who's affected by it, how it works, and how you can recognize it. By the time Dr. Matthis is finished, you will know something amazing about oxytocin. And what I love about it is that we're not only going to tap into it from the natural sense, but we're going to tap into it from the biblical, the spiritual sense as well. Because you know what goes on Let's Talk About It with Wanda. We're going to put some of the word of Elohim in here somewhere, because why? As Christians, you know, we are Christian. We recognize, or we are a part of Christendom. My life is wrapped around the word. So what is me? You will get some of. So I'm so excited to have Dr. Matthis here with us. But before she introduces herself, I want to ask you that if you're on YouTube, make sure that you have subscribed to my channel, that you have liked this program, and you share this video. If you're on Facebook, please make sure that you have liked or loved this video and that you have shared it. And please make sure you're making comments in the comment section so the algorithms can work their work and we can get some people over here that need to be a part of the conversation. Now, let me pre-warn you that while this is a biblical application, these next few times, there are going to be some adult conversation in here. So if you have any children, some young ones, you might want to shuffle them off to the next room. Get your pens, your papers, and your pencils ready, because you are going to want to take copious notes for the next 2 weeks. So, as I've stated, the beautiful, the phenomenal Dr. Matthis is here, and I'm going to have her introduce herself, because it might be somebody here that doesn't know you, Dr.
It could be. Thank you so much, daughter. I am excited to be here on today. And of course, oxytocin has been, as many of you know, a favorite for Wanda and I, for my daughter here. So I'm excited. I am a pastor. I am a therapist. I am a mom. I am a grandmother. I am a published author. I have Defining Moments, which you can find on Facebook. And I also am the CEO and founder of Visionary Mentoring and Coaching Services. I also teach mental health first aid awareness, really supporting the community, both spiritually and naturally. And this that we're talking about this Sunday and next Sunday, oxytocin in regards to relationships. It's something that's very near and dear to my heart. For many of us, for those of us, doesn't matter if you're male or female, many of us have experienced some type of relationship that has gone awry, or we're not quite sure why things are going the way they have gone or they are going. And when it comes to a dead end or it gets really, really off the rails, so to speak, we are left in a quandary wondering what's happening with the relationship. So oxytocin is the culprit. And so I'm excited to be able to share that. Wanda and I are going to dive into this. And so I'm excited for this space. Daughter, back to you.
Wonderful. So as Dr. Matthis has said, if you saw my post about a week ago, we usually talk about this at this time of year because it is something that affects a lot of people and they have no idea why it's happening. This is the time of year where it can be very emotional for people. It can be very lonely for people. We be all up in our feelings this time of year. That song, I sang it last year. I sang a little bit this year because the first thing that comes to mind is I really can't stay, but baby, it's cold outside. No, 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 no. I gotta go away. No, baby, it's cold outside. That used to be one of my favorite songs. But he is really like beckoning her to stay there, and she's like, "No, I gotta go." He's like, "No, but you should stay in here because it's colder out there." Because he got a plan. He got a plan. But little did he know that little oxytocin was going on, and she's about to be caught up in something, and he was about to be caught up in something. And this time of year, a lot of people are caught up in them situationships because of what we're going to talk about tonight, the oxytocin. So, like I said, sit back, get ready. We are about to take you to a journey that you might not have expected. So, Dr. Matthis, let's go. Let's talk about it.
Yep, so let's talk about it. Oxytocin, we talk about, as Wanda says, every year we talk about this time of the year because what is it, from probably Thanksgiving giving until after that, what is it, Valentine's Day? People are booed up, coupled up, twinned up, whatever you want to call it, and just loving on one another. And then after that, things start going downhill because it's a part of the season and everybody's feeling all good and loving and kind and giving. But the culprit of all that is not just he looks good, she looks good, but it's the oxytocin. Now, for many of you all, we've heard people say, I've never heard of oxytocin. Oxytocin is so important. It is a necessity. Oxytocin is the reason why we have contractions when we are having our child or children. Oxytocin is the reason why babies come out and they learn how to latch onto the breast and suck that breast milk right away without being taught. That's oxytocin. But the other part of that is that it actually flows through the bodies of male and female. And it is a chemical messenger. It sends influences to our brains. It sends messages to our brains. It tells us when we are sexually aroused. It helps us to recognize what we like. It helps us to trust someone. It brings us with a romantic attachment. And also it is, as it is parent and infant bonding, it is male and female bonding or relationship bonding. And so this oxytocin that flows through our bodies can bring a very positive impact or a negative impact. And so when we talk about that, many people don't realize, and I say it all the time, many of you have heard me say before, if a woman's oxytocin level is here and the man is not treating her right, or she gets a little upset, or things go awry, she will burn your house down and drag you out. She will do some crazy stuff. She will bust out car windows. She will bust out household windows. She would do some things. And it used to be where people thought only a man would act up. But women, when our oxytocin levels are off, we have bought all in. I tell you that we will do some things that you will we can become quite creative. Let me put it like that. And so when we talk about the oxytocin, we also talk about the oxytocin having a negative and positive impact, and also talk about the oxytocin. What does it do for us sexually? How does it impact us? When we become sexually aroused and when we become excited about him or her. But as I say all the time, we talk about this, before you even have an actual sexual penetration, the communication is what arouses the oxytocin level. And by the time he continues to talk to you about how beautiful you are, how good you look, how sexy you are, and how much he wants to get you in the bed, and how much he wants to do this, that, or the third, whatever that person is saying, it brings up the oxytocin levels. It increases your trust for them. It increases your desire for them. And you're wondering, all hot and bothered, why am I all hot and bothered by this person? And why do I really want to be with them? Because it's the communication. That oxytocin communication causes it to flip on just like that. That switch flips on, and I can't get enough of him. I need to see him. I need to hear from him. I need to talk to him. And I love how Wanda's sharing that. We're going to talk about it from not only the natural perspective, as I'm sharing with you now, but also from the spiritual perspective. Because for many of you, you're going to find out today, and probably next week if you show up again, that there are a lot of biblical instances and biblical characters that speak live about oxytocin. I mean, they're screaming oxytocin, and we just missed it because we're so used to just hearing about a particular character. We talk about them. We've heard them taught in Sunday school and Bible study. We've heard them preached about, but we don't think about that oxytocin. And so we wanted to talk about that tonight because oxytocin is really, really important. When we think about that, I want you to think about where you are if you're in a relationship right now. Are you in a relationship because of oxytocin or because you really like that person? Are you in a relationship because of oxytocin or do you really care about them or do you love them? And I can safely say that for most of us, from Thanksgiving until the day after, what is it, Valentine's Day, is oxytocin. It's just feeling good. Everything is wonderful. It's the time of giving gifts, hanging out, going on vacation, spending time together. It's the oxytocin. I really think I like this person. But outside of the oxytocin, you have to be able to be interested in that person, connected to them, even when they get on your last nerve, even when they don't look good to you in the morning time, even when their breath is not smelling good, even when they do something that pisses you off and makes you angry, you can still pray for them and love them and care for them. But the oxytocin has a specific arena in which it focuses. As long as you are feeding the monster, as we call it, as long as you are feeding that chemistry in the body, oxytocin, everything is good. Well, we want to talk about some biblical characters today, right, Wanda? And I want to tell you, these ladies, so I digress. Let me just say it like this. Communication happens, and that is the actual penetration for women. You all don't believe me? Go back to the Garden of Eden. The serpent didn't talk to Adam, he talked to Eve. And there was no sexual intercourse as some people try to twist that. There was none of that. Had it been so, then the Bible would have said, and then the serpent knew Eve. But didn't talk about bestiality there. Well, don't y'all, that's a whole nother subject. But however, the penetration of the mind and the penetration of bending the wheel to get Eve to eat of the forbidden fruit from the forbidden tree, there was a communication that brought about the penetration. Oxytocin penetrates the mind. Oxytocin penetrates the soul. Oxytocin bonds your soul, your spirit. You know, when we talk about soul ties, and people's like, well, it's a soul tie, it's a soul tie. That's the
Yeah.
oxytocin, right? And you wonder why you all tied up with this person. You can't sleep without them. You can't stop thinking about them. You want to be with them all the time. You want to have them on the phone. You want to talk to them by Facebook. You want to talk to them by anything. I just need this person, right? That communication penetrates the very mindset, penetrates the core and essence of your being. And when the essence of who you are has been penetrated by communication and your oxytocin level is up there, that person's voice becomes what leads you. That person's voice and their presence is what causes your functionality. Like you literally do not know who
Yes.
you
Yeah.
are without that person. If you do not have your own identity, that person shapes and models your identity. That's a problem. And so it's important that we know who we are. But Eve had a little problem. So the serpent was talking to her. God knows that if you eat of this, then you will be like him. He doesn't want you to be like him. And she literally took that fruit, inspected it, ate it, and literally gave it to Adam before she can even swallow her bite. Why? Because she knew that she had done wrong. That penetration came by way of communication, the communication every day by the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Please believe it didn't happen overnight. This was a constant, ongoing thing. Maybe the serpent missed a day or two here and there, and Eve was wasting away, pining away, looking for the serpent. Where is he? I've not seen him. And he shows up. There you are. I've been looking for you. I missed you. Communication, penetration, oxytocin. So it started there. But we want to talk about some ladies that, man, I tell you, Wanda, we ready about this one?
Right. Yeah. But we got to stay just for a second. Gotta stay at Adam and Eve for a minute, because if we understand oxytocin a little better, we'll understand why it was so easy
Yes,
for him to easily
yes,
bite.
yes. And so that
Why it
whole
was so
communication,
easy. Yeah.
right? And so he had to tell
Uh-huh.
Eve who she was. I just said it's about your identification, right? Eve should have already
Hmm.
known, according to what Adam had already shared with her, and God brought her forth, and he says, bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh, you should be called woman. That let Eve know that she was everything that Eve needed to be. She was everything that Adam needed her to be. There was nothing left undone. See, God doesn't have do things with us. Whoever you are right now in your life and wherever you are in your life is who God meant for you to be, and is where God means for you to be for this specific time and season. But identification issues can cause us to have problems. And so this particular oxytocin chemical that's flowing through her brains and flowing through her body, the serpent utilized that as a way in a form of communication. He had to penetrate the core of her being and of her essence. He had to penetrate her mind to get her will to be bent to his will. He had to communicate and penetrate her. And the only way he can do that is by communicating to her and telling her how
Yes,
powerful she could be and how powerful she is.
yes,
But don't you want to
yes,
be even much more powerful than what you are now? Don't you really want to have the
yes,
wisdom and the knowledge that you normally wouldn't have? But if you eat this fruit, God knows that if you eat this fruit, he doesn't want you to have this knowledge, because you would definitely be like him. But it's interesting because the Bible clearly tells us without the flow of oxytocin that we are created in God's image and likeness. So that means we already have a great
absolutely.
amount of who we are in God as God is in us. But the serpent continued to tell her, you have to have more. You need more of this. You need to do more of this. And the only way you can do more and be great is that you eat of this fruit. That oxytocin happened there. And so anything after Eve in the Garden of Eden, that oxytocin, that, let me put it to you like this. Oxytocin was always a chemical flowing in our bodies, flowing through our brains, but it was lying dormant. It really wasn't something that was a necessity, so to speak. There was going to be no problem with bearing children. There was going to be no pain or any of those things. There was not going to be no monthly cycle issue, if you hear what I'm saying. But the moment that the serpent decided to communicate, push, penetrate the oxytocin, because they say, how can I get in here? Let me in. See, the enemy can't come and take anything
Mhm.
from you. The brother can't do anything to you unless you allow him to. Well, the oxytocin had to be made alive. It had to be awakened. And the enemy knew that he couldn't touch that mind of hers. He knew he couldn't touch the soul of hers. He knew he couldn't touch her ideologies unless he pushed for the oxytocin. He had to push for the
Yeah,
oxytocin by way of communication. And the more he communicated,
communication.
the more he penetrated. And that steel wall was breaking down. He communicated to her every day. Skipped a few days here and there, every day. Ladies, have you ever wondered why Junebug, he show up and he's talking to you, whether he's smelling good in church or outside the church, in a club, wherever you meet him at? And by the time he really, really talks to you, he's just flowing 1 week straight, 2 weeks straight, 30 days straight. Next thing you know, he start hitting, missing here and there. But it's too late because he's already penetrated your mind. And you're calling him, but he's not calling back. You're texting, but he's not responding. You're going to look for him at the spot. He's not there. You're going to the church and he's not there at the 8 o'clock service. You try the 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock service. You just can't find him. And then all of a sudden he shows up out of nowhere. Well, I just been trying to handle some things, been busy, blah, 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 blase, blase. And you take it hook, line, and sinker. Why? Because your oxytocin has already been penetrated. You've already had that
Yes,
connection of a bonding. We've already linked up and paired up with him. But the interesting thing is, have you noted that it's not the same for men? It doesn't mean that they do not have oxytocin or the chemistry flowing through their bodies, but the level in which we need it to be able to have that parent-child bonding, to be able to have our children to come out learning how to latch onto our breast for breast milk, and to be able to learn how, or to come into being a parent. Those things are important for us, and so the oxytocin helps to work with us with that. Well, the males, they don't need that because they don't have a womb to carry children, right? But it does flow. But we are much more easily inclined to be connected to or be enmeshed in and be tied up to him or that relationship because the oxytocin flows much more freely through our bodies, our brain chemistry. It's just like if you come into a house, when you come home and it's evening time and the house is dark, In order for you to see, you have to flip the light switch to turn the lights on. It is the same indication or indicative of when he begins to communicate, he penetrates and he turns on the switch, the light bulb, if you will, of the oxytocin that flows through our bodies. For a long time, it's just been lying dormant, like we haven't been in a relationship for a minute. We're not really caring one way or the other, or we would like to have one, but we've not met someone to really, really turn on the light switch, so to speak. But this one comes along. He has the right smell, the right touch, the right taste, the right look, the right sound, the right body shape, everything, because the enemy knows what we like better than what we know of ourselves. And so he knows what to say. As I like how Wanda said, you had me at hello, right? And just that one simple word, it's like maybe he says hello, the other may say hey, the other may say hi you or something. But just at that once in a lifetime moment of communication, the penetration begins to happen. The light switch comes on and the oxytocin begins to flow. And now he has opportunity to communicate to you. The serpent in the Garden of Eden had opportunity to communicate to Eve. She looked forward to. The Bible doesn't tell us, but she looked forward to it. How do you know? I'm glad you asked. Dr. Matthis, how was that the case? Because she continued to talk to him every day. Because see, we know how, if we're not interested in communicating with someone, we know how to turn them off. We know how to put a wall up and say, you know what, I don't have time. I'm not interested. No, thank you. And we mean that. But Eve looked forward to having communication with the serpent, who was more subtle than all the other creatures. So subtle until again, he used oxytocin to penetrate that wall, to put her into a place or push her into a space of disobedience. Disobedience is everything when it comes to oxytocin because it can cost us. I put it to you like this. When we tell Yahweh who we're going to marry, who we're going to date, he said he's not for you. That disobedience costs us everything. And the oxytocin level is so high until we put oxytocin before God. Let me say that again. The oxytocin level is so high until we put oxytocin before God, before Yahweh. It becomes our priority. It becomes our drive, our motivation, our need, our hunger, our thirst. We cannot live without him. We will spend our last dime on him. We will turn over our mortgage for him. We will give him our car and he picks us up an hour and a half late every day. And he don't even have a license to drive. We will buy his shoes. We will buy his drawers, his suits, his clothes. We will push because he has such great potential. Well, can I tell you something? If that brother doesn't know he has potential, then you're wasting your time. But the oxytocin will get us to do everything. So the oxytocin that we see happening just right here today, when we look through the word of God, especially specifically when it comes to those of us as of the female gender, we will find out that it was opened up. That floodgate was opened from the Garden of Eden when the serpent continued to communicate with Eve. He just committed to communicate every day. And he skipped a day here or there. And then he talked to her some more. And each day it was opening and just communicating and penetrating. And now finally, she didn't even think about the consequences or what Adam had shared with her or what God had shared with Adam and he shared it with Eve. She didn't care about that. She just wanted to touch the tree, touch the fruit, pick the fruit, eat the fruit, and give it to Adam. And the enemy of our soul knew that in order for anything to happen to humanity, the way it has been happening, even though our redemption has come, it could be much worse, I promise you. But he knew he had to go by way of female. He knew he had to go by way of the woman, not Adam. That's killing two birds or a gazillion birds with one stone just by going to Eve. And so you have to realize how important you are, especially specifically strategically when it comes to the oxytocin. The oxytocin that flows through us will cause us to have a place or a mindset of curiosity. Eve was very curious about the tree. It's not the only tree in the Garden of Eden, but she was very curious about this one tree. We can become curious about him. Any of you, okay, I'll put it to you like this. Here's a question. Have you ever met someone or dealt with someone and you knew you had no business dealing with him? You had no business calling him. You had no business communicating with him, had no business sleeping with him, had no business going to with him for coffee, tea, milkshake, or pee, period. But we did, and it cost us. It was a challenge. And we wish we had never called, accepted a call, sent a text message, accepted a text message. The oxytocin will cause us to have phone sex, and we know we shouldn't. I'm just saying. Now, Wanda did warn you that we are talking big girl business over here. We're talking big grown folks business over here.
I
We
did.
did.
I did.
But it's important because the oxytocin, the chemistry that flows through our veins, that Yahweh himself allowed a place within us for a functionality that is positive, has since the Garden of Eden been a negativity for us in many ways throughout many generations for many reasons. And we have to be mindful of that, especially now for many of us, even if you don't say it here, some of us are in the beginning of being booed up or being in a relationship or looking at it. We're excited about it because we haven't gotten to June, which is February the 15th yet, the day after Valentine's Day. And so we're excited, about him, this new love in our lives. And they keep saying the things that we need to hear. See, when Eve was in the Garden of Eden and the serpent was talking to her, he talked to her about how beautiful she was and how wonderful she was and how awesome she was. But she could be even more beautiful and even much more wonderful than what she already was, and much more anointed and powerful, much more wiser and much more knowledgeable. And she wanted that. She desired that. But when we are not in a place of completeness in him as he is in us, it will put us in places to make decisions and choices that the communication actually penetrates in a negative manner. And that oxytocin is all over the place. It's up and down. The light switch goes on, it goes off, it goes on, it goes off. Yeah, that communication is everything. And we, by nature, as women, we're communicators.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Communication for women, communication is so
Yes.
important to us. And what I'm thinking about is that how from the beginning, evil stepped in
Mm-hmm.
and why? Because communication is important to
Mm-hmm.
women, right? And had Adam just stepped in and started communicating
Mm-hmm.
with her, we wouldn't have had the scenario play out the way it did. And isn't it ironic that men will work hard on their game? They'll work hard on their rap. They'll work on those lines, whatever it is, to get you enticed, to
Mm-hmm.
get you intoxicated, to get you where you are just mesmerized and now all you think about is him. But once you're married, once you're in a relationship, communication is hard
Yeah.
for them.
You know what? And it's good that you bring that up because communication is, think of it like this. Good that you brought that up. But the communication has always been hard for them. And they have always not been communicators. But because we are by nature communicators, we filled up the empty space. All he had to do was nod, right, yep, yeah, you're right. And give a few little pieces of conversation here and there, give a comment here and there. But for the most part, when you think back throughout the course of the relationship, even before you said I do, we have been the major communicator, not only for ourselves or from ourselves, but for the both of us in a relationship, because most men are not communicators, not like we are. We are the communicators. We talk, we ask questions, we want answers, we need details, we want even further details, and we want to know the ABCs and the XYZs and the 1, 2, 3s. We want to know why, and we want to know who, what, when, and where. When a man is not interested in all of that, by the time he says, I have a desire, I want to marry you, will you marry me? That's pretty much it. And then all of a sudden we're upset and we're acting confused and wondering why. Well, he doesn't really talk that much and he doesn't have much to say. The brother never communicated in the
Yeah.
first place. We've just been too busy talking to recognize that he wasn't talking in the first place. That's the first thing that we miss. We miss that all the time. Men are not really communicators.
Well, mom. Now there are some that they really got you
True,
because they did some
true,
good talking.
true.
Now, they did some good talking, and when they get you on that phone, they do some good
True.
talking to you, and like you said, that oxytocin. That's why a lot of women are caught up now because it's his
Yes.
conversation that has them all
Mhm.
wrapped up. And then when they aren't getting that conversation, like you said, they don't know who they are. They don't know. They haven't even consulted with Yahweh if this is the person
And
they're
that's the
supposed to be
problem.
with, because it's the penetration that started at the conversation. So now they're all
Yeah,
wrapped up because, oh, he's talking to me, oh, he
yeah,
likes me, and all of that. And then, like you said, but they really aren't great
yeah, yeah.
communicators, but they communicate enough to get you wrapped up. Why is that, mom?
Well,
Why is that?
that's that. Think about it. Let's go back to the Garden of Eden. Adam was put to sleep. He woke up. He saw Eve. He says, "Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. She should be called woman, my woman." And that was it. Because as you stated, Adam could have come at any time to talk and to really, really put closure to this serpent coming and talking to his woman every day. But he didn't. He was over there minding his business, doing what God had required him to do. But he wasn't mindful of of what God had given him as a responsibility. Once he said, "This is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh," she should be called woman. As far as Adam was concerned, she's all mine. I don't have to worry about it. We're good. This is a done deal. And Eve bought into it hook, line, and sinker. But because we are creatures of a very great depth of understanding, of communication, of desire, of emotionality, we need. And so the serpent comes in to fill that void that Adam wasn't even aware of that was there, because we are the other side of him. We are the other side, the sensitive side, the more emotional side. We are emotional creatures. We are communicative creatures. We are the other side of the atom, so to speak. We're that Eve. And so the enemy, serpent, comes to fill that void. But Adam didn't feel a need to have a deep conversation. I'm with you, you're with me, we're together. And then there are those, like you said, that have that communication. They talk, 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 talk. They keep turning the switch on. They keep brighting up the light. And then they got us hooked in rope, line, and sinker. But there are those few that really do not have to talk. Let me tell you what I mean by that. I was looking at something the other day, and she met the guy and she started talking. And within an hour, he knew everything about her from the time that she was 6 until she was 32. That brother didn't ask but 2 questions. What's your name? And can I have your number? And it went from there. And the more she talked, and the more he stared, and the more he just nodded, the more she talked, the more he stared, the more she nodded, he nodded, and it was over. Because the fact of his presence, just those few words of communication, penetrated and opened her enough to just talk. And now she knew nothing about him, and he knew everything about her. That's the part I mean right there. That's a problem. That's a problem. That part.
That's a big problem. We talk too much. We give way too much
But
too soon. We just happy,
oh,
just happy,
yes,
glad.
she was very happy, glad. And what made it even more interesting is that she knew this brother was married. And she just kept talking and he just kept nodding. So at any given time, either she could have walked away and discontinued the conversation, or that brother could have walked away and discontinued the conversation. But we're still talking about the serpent, who was more subtle than any of the other creatures in the Garden of Eden, still walking around acting up. Period. See, we suppose that he stopped at the Garden of Eden. No, no, he's still running around. This is why oxytocin gets tainted the way that it does. He's still communicating. This is why oxytocin gets the negative impact that it gets, because he's still talking. I mean, literally, he could have walked away at "I'm married." She could have walked away and stopped talking at "he's married." But she kept talking and he kept listening. And now there's a problem. Need I tell you what happened after that? It wasn't long. And so that when we think about it, when the oxytocin is a very major component of chemistry that flows through us, it is a necessity for us as women who are carriers of the womb. We have children and we connect and we bond. But that bonding process also happens in relationships with the oxytocin. Like I said earlier, is when you come home and your house is fully dark. But once you turn on the light switch, light floods to darkness. But when we look at the oxytocin, it can have the exact replica of that. Nope, it can have the exact opposite of that, because the oxytocin that was meant to bond us, just like when a man and woman gets married, and when it says in the scripture, it says, and Adam knew his wife Eve. Or when you see in the scripture in the Old Testament, say, and he knew her. And when it says that, we know that they have become sexually involved, right? And so then there becomes that bonding. And that's when the oxytocin for the husband and wife really meshes together. It bonds them together. And the friendship blossoms, and the relationship blossoms, and the communication blossoms. And yes, there are some ups and downs, but for the most part, they are bonded together because there's that connectivity from one place of oxytocin to another place of oxytocin. It's that switch off, that give and take, so to speak. But when we see what happens now for many of us, we see it where, again, like you said, that wasn't who Yahweh meant for us to be with in the first place. We're not to be connected to that person at all. But because we've become so lax and we really don't know a lot about oxytocin, and somebody told me a long time ago, a couple of years ago, they said, I wish someone would have told me about oxytocin in the 8th grade. I said, oh yeah, they don't tell a lot of us about that, but they supposedly we should know this, because we carry children in our wombs, but many people are not aware of that. It's just like, all I just know is oxytocin could be this way. I can't stand him. I don't like his behavior. I don't like his attitude. He thinks he's all that. Or he just, but the sex is really good. That's because the oxytocin has told you to hold on. And you're literally bonded to the sexual aspect of that relationship and not anything else outside of that. Actually, it's not a relationship at all. It's just a situationship. It's just a know me ship. It's just a connectivity. But outside of that, I don't like the person's attitude. I don't like how he dresses, or maybe he doesn't smell good, or there's a lot of different things that happen there. But when it comes time for us to get together for the sexual aspect of it, oh, I'm all in for that. Then after a while, that can become boring. But the oxytocin is something that we have to learn to take seriously, because the oxytocin will speak for you when you're not ready to speak. That part. We can become not only very vocal and talkative, but we can become bored as women. We can become very lonely as women. There's a lot of lonely women, and they want to be in a relationship. That's how we end up in bad relationships in the first place. So we can become very lonely as women. And so the problem with that is being lonely as a woman. That oxytocin level is just like this. It's just sitting there, just waiting to be clicked on, just sitting there. And so, as you said, Wanda, you had me at hello. What's the way he says hello? What's the way he says hey? He looks you up and down and drinks you in and undresses you, and you know you've been undressed, but you like it. It gives you a flutter because it's, this makes you feel good. It helps with that issue of loneliness and feeling like I need to have someone because I'm just tired of being by myself. Now, at that, now you're communicating to him because he has already communicated, penetrated, and now you're talking back. And so this is nothing new. It just seems to be new to many of us because we haven't looked at scripture in a totality in a way that Yahweh would have us to look at it. In other words, we look at and we have been taught the word of God in a one-dimensional state of existence. But when we begin to look at it from the aspect of how Yahweh would like for us to look at it, for us in totality as individuals that are created in his image and likeness, then comes to light what oxytocin is really all about. Again, like you said, Wanda, Mom, let's just sit here in the Garden of Eden for a moment because it's where it all began. It's where it all started, that oxytocin. And so Adam's oxytocin level went up when he saw Eve, and it went down once he said, this is woman, my woman, came from my womb. She's mine. And once I've made that claim and I've made my claim, that's it. That's all. I'm not worried about anyone coming in and moving in on my territory. Oxytocin and the conversation that happened between the serpent and Eve in the Garden of Eden not only drew her into, watch this now, into taking of the forbidden fruit from the forbidden tree, but oxytocin introduced the relationship issues of adultery. Y'all ask me how. To have a communication with the serpent in the Garden of Eden, the way Eve and the serpent communicated every day. The Bible says that the serpent was more subtle than any of the other creatures, meaning that every other creature in the Garden of Eden and every human being or anyone that knew anything about the serpent, thank you, Michelle, I'm getting to it. They all knew that the serpent was up to no good most of the time. The fact that I am going to spend every day talking to you, allowing you to penetrate the very core of my being so that my oxytocin levels are off the chart and out of the roof, says that my relationship, my friendship, my communication with my husband, Adam, has been shaken, has been rocked, has been severed to a certain extent, and now there's a level of adultery. Adultery means allowing someone else to become a part of a relationship that have no business being there. Y'all got that? Go ahead, Wanda.
No, I'm shook. I'm shook because I've never, ever considered that.
Let us say we just one dimensional with the word, right?
Yeah.
When we really begin to look at the word the way Yahweh would have us to know him and to know his holy writ, we see things differently. We see things in a way that we should see things. And for the most part, some of us are upset because if I knew then what I know now, and why didn't I ever know this? But when we allow him to really minister to us and open our hearts and minds to him, we see things the way he's always meant for us to see them and to have that revelation. That adultery was something that stood just stagnant there. There was Adam and Eve. But then as you get down through the generations you see that there becomes some adultery that comes into play. It takes you right back to the Garden of Adam and Eve, because in the Garden of Eden, when he's talking to her, he has no business communicating with her. Why? Again, do you think he did not talk to Adam? He didn't have no business in there in the first place, talking to them. He needed to be about his business, minding his own business. Adam and Eve had something to do, which God had required of them. But because she decided that she didn't want to do what she should have been doing, and she's over here on the other side of the mountain, so to speak, it gives him an opportunity to penetrate her core being, but also takes on the role. Put it to you like this: when we allow him in our lives that shouldn't be there, Yahweh didn't even put him there. We just decided to bring him and put him there. That's our spiritual adultery against Yahweh himself.
Ooh, put him there or allow him there.
Yeah.
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 Wow.
Yeah. I want him right here. And this is what I want you to bless, Yahweh. And he's going to stay here and you're going to like it. Now I need you to bless this. Are you kidding me? But we do it. Even if we never verbally articulate that, it is our behaviors. Because we know, we say, oh, I felt it. It's a knowing. I felt it in my gut, or I discerned it. You know, he has no business in your life. And then the first thing, we are 30 days in, 90 days in the pastor's office, asking for the pastor to give us some type of marital counseling because he's cheating. We're not getting along. He's cursed me out. This happened, that happened. You know, all these things when it should have happened in the first place. So everything that could happen in relationships that could have a negative impact on us literally happened at the concept in the Garden of Eden. That part. It is why he talked to her and not to him. And as you said earlier, we talk too much. We like to talk. Talk. He had questions. She had questions. She had answers. He had answers. But each time he moved her closer to that tree. And every other conversation was about that tree. We talked about other stuff too, but then there's a tree. And he talked about other stuff, but then there was a tree. He said stuff, but then there was the tree. And that tree continued to come up. There's always, then there's him, or then there's that type. Put it to you like this. I think, for many of you probably experienced this. Somebody just happens to slide in your DMs or show up on your social media page and ask if he can have a conversation with you, or say, hey, how you doing? Or like your picture and tell you you're beautiful. Ladies, you ever had that experience? I always block them immediately, even before I got married. Why? Because if you slide in my DM, I can guarantee you up to no good. There's a gazillion women on the planet. Pick another one, not this one. Don't be sliding over here. I don't want to talk to you. This is not a Garden of Eden. I don't want you to be subtle. I don't want you to act up. Just stay over there. I'm blocking you. Found it to be very good. Wise choice. You'd be surprised at how many women just at the point of he had me at hello, where he slid into my DM and I just started talking to him and we found out we had a lot in common. Do you know how many other women he's talked to on social media? You're not the only one. You just are the only one that bit. That part right there. You're the only one that bit. You got to keep plugging until you find a hole, a space in there, some level of oxytocin that will let me in. Just knocking. Just let me in. Let me in. Okay, this one don't work. Let me in. Just keep knocking. And now there's someone that finally opened up. And you knew when you looked at those eyes that you shouldn't open the door to that. You knew when you looked at that face, even the name, you shouldn't have done it. But curiosity kills the cat. That part. Just being curious. And so when we look at that, as we move forward and we look in the word, look in the Holy Writ, you will find that for every generation after Adam and Eve, women have had some type of issues. Either they have been the bearer of causing problems by way of oxytocin, or they've had issues by way of oxytocin. That part right there. Now, one, you want to add something? You got a question?
No, this is so good. This is so good. Listen, if you've joined us, we want to say thank you for being here. Take a moment to make sure, if you're on YouTube, that you're following this channel and that you've liked this program and that you share it. And if you're on Facebook, please make sure that you are following me. You have liked or loved this program and you share it. And then also, please make some comments in the thread so that we can keep the algorithms going, because this your typing will cause somebody else that needs to hear this conversation to come and join us. And for those of you who have been typing away in the threads, Miss Michelle, Miss Linda, Thank you so much. This is an amazing conversation. Dr.
Mhm.
Mathis has given us some things that I hadn't even considered when it comes to Adam and Eve and adultery. What? Adam and Eve and adultery, all behind a conversation. And we know if somebody would say, "Oh, that's see, you doing too much. You putting too much on it." No, 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 no. Because if you are have been married, or even if you haven't been married, or you've been in a monogamous relationship, a committed relationship, and the guy, you know these things where they have work wives and work husbands, and then your real wives and real husbands get upset because it becomes an emotional tie. And the emotional
Mhm.
ties happen when there's conversation, or if you're in a committed relationship and he's talking or she's talking a little bit more to someone than you think they should, you get bothered by that. Why? Because you know after a while there's going to be that connectivity. That's that oxytocin. And I hadn't even considered that the thought of adultery with Adam and Eve, nor had I considered when we allow someone in our lives that Yahweh did not sanction to be there. We're committing
Mhm.
adultery with him as well. So
Mhm.
this is amazing, Dr. Mathis. You have dropped some bombs, and we haven't. It's like we got like 15 more minutes, and we haven't even to the subject. Our subject tonight are the people, I should say, biblically that are part of our subject. But I think we can. We've done really good with Adam and Eve. I think we can introduce it,
We
and
can
then
introduce it.
yeah,
Okay.
you can
At
go.
least we can get started, huh? Yeah, we can get started. So,
Yes,
and it's good because, like you said, we wanted to lay the foundation and the groundwork for what it looks like, because oftentimes we can miss that and miss some of the telltale signs of what it looks like. And so, as we're thinking about Adam and Eve, and as we're moving forward, and Wanda and I were talking about this because these are some of our favorite female characters here. I want to talk about Rachel and Leah. And if you know anything about Rachel, Leah, and poor Jacob, I don't know if I want to feel sorry for Rachel, Leah, Jacob, Bilhah, Zilpah. It's just
listen, all the children. Listen, I. This is why when we talk, I was so excited about this. We might. I don't know. We're gonna try to do it in 2 weeks. But when I tell you, this was so amazing to me when she told me who her first subjects were. I was
Mhm,
blown away because I've actually been studying the scenario. That's what I call it. The
mhm,
scenario, the situationship of
mhm,
Jacob, Raquel, and Leah, and
mhm,
them boys. But basically, Jacob, Raquel, and Leah. And
yes,
for the last couple of Sabbaths, I've been just in that. If I go away from it, I come back. And
oh
so,
my
yeah,
God.
talk to us about the oxytocin.
Listen, let me tell you, this right here has always fascinated me, and there are times when I can go back and I can look at it, and no matter how many times I read it, there are times that I really feel sorry for Jacob. I just like, brother, you just walked into a landmine with this. And so, we look at this and we are looking at Genesis 29. So the challenge is that, as Wanda shared, she's looked at it, she's reading it. We've been looking at it. I want to challenge you. We want to challenge you to go back and look at this chapter, because I promise you, when you go and look at it now, you won't be able to see it the same again. It's like, we say, when once you see something, you can't unsee it. Once you hear something, you can't unhear it. Once you come to understand something and have a revelation, it stands because it has its own foundation to stand on. But Jacob, he goes to his uncle Laban. So we look in chapter 29. He has to. He's running for his life, and as he is in this space, the first person that he sees is Rachel, and this is where you find out that the brother had oxytocin, because as soon as he saw Rachel, he was so, oh, just in love with her on sight,
He
until he
was
forgot
done.
everything
He
and
was
just,
done. He
he
was
was
so
done. You
done.
can just stick a plastic
He was
paper fork in him,
done.
and it was over. He just melted. He let me take care of your animals for you. Let me make sure they have water. Let me make sure they're taken care of. And even though he started out by, crying and letting her know that he was a relative. Now, let me just digress. So you all do know and remember, I think one of you mentioned it earlier about sister wives and things of this nature. Now, Jacob goes to Laban, his uncle, which is his mother's brother, which makes Rachel and Leah his cousins, his first cousins. You all are aware of that, right? Because sometimes we overlook that. We just think about Jacob, Rachel, and Leah, but we forget the fact that they're first cousins, all three of them, two sisters and then a cousin, first cousin, right? But when he sees Rachel, he is in love with her immediately. His oxytocin level kicks in. That's right, Michelle, full effect, like it is up the roof. And Rachel didn't even say hello. She didn't say a word to him. That's right, just sprang. Bada bing. It's just over. He sees her. He doesn't need anyone else. He doesn't want anyone else. He just wants Rachel. And so now we are here where we get to see some craziness that happens. And you cannot make this up. It's in your Bible, whether it's Amplified, King James Version, New International Version, it's in your Bible. And so when you look here, by the time he gets to day 30, Laban, he says, I can't have you working for free. Name your price. What's your wages? This brother had been thinking about this for quite some time from day one. He says, give me Rachel. I want to marry Rachel. I want her to be my wife. Immediately.
But the other part is, and a lot of times we miss this because we just know the story, but that's why you got to take your time and read it. This didn't happen right away. Y'all was there for a while.
Yeah.
So he's seeing her day in and day out, probably just salivating it. Yes. And listen, it ain't in there, but I can guarantee you they was having some conversation.
That part right there. They had to have conversations.
They was having conversations. Remember? And Raquel was digging on him. I'm digging on you. You digging on me. Yeah, they was digging on each other. So when he asked him, he was like, "Yeah, give me Raquel."
That's who I want. That's who I want. Right. When he met her at the well, he got to see her. He got to kiss her as a first cousin. He got to smell her. He got to touch her. He knew what her touch was like. He knew what her smell was like. He knew how she felt. And it was what he desired. That oxytocin level was off the chain. And so there was communication, right? Hi, how are you? How's it going? Just basic communication here and there. Not a lot, not too deep, just enough. A little staring in the eyes here, a little cutting of the eyes when you're passing by there, a little, he's dropping everything to go and run and help Rachel with this. And when Laban says, what will be your wages? He could have asked for sheep, cattle, donkeys, cows, goats, pigs, chickens. No, I want Rachel. I just want Rachel. I don't care about anything else. I want Rachel. He didn't even know Leah existed. I just want Rachel. And Laban immediately said, okay, it's better that you marry her than someone else, some stranger. Now that right there kicks me all the way to the curb because you didn't even think about it. You just said yes. And the first time I read that, I said, this man is up to no good. Immediately. Because even though Jacob is the first cousin of Rachel, a father, a real father, would say, oh, no, I don't know about that. You asked for my daughter. Let's just ask for something else.
That part. And because she's the youngest.
Yes. So, yes.
And he up to something. You know he up to something. Because it's like, okay, all right. I'd rather she be with you than anybody else. Yes. Knowing that this chick is too young. She the youngest. You can't marry her first.
Yeah. But Jacob didn't know that. He didn't understand the customs of the law of the land. He went down the road to his uncle, and he felt like the same customs that applied to him at his mom and dad's house applied to him here. But no, brother, you didn't know. It was a whole nother story. And so he was excited. His oxytocin, this is one of the few times when we talk about some other, I'll share another brother, but not right now. But Jacob's oxytocin levels was off the charts for this woman. He just had to have her. He dreamt about her. The Holy Writ doesn't say, but I can guarantee you that he dreamt about her. He daydreamed about her. He open dreamed about her. Eyes closed, he thought about her. Eyes open, he thought about her. When it was eating time, he thought about her. He just loved Rachel. He had to have her. He wanted her. His oxytocin level here was not just about sex. It was everything about Rachel that he liked. It was everything about Rachel that he desired. It was everything about Rachel that he wanted. The reason why I am bringing up that specific point, and although Wanda pointed out that technically she was the youngest, so he couldn't marry her first, but he didn't know it. But ladies, when we are in the right spiritual positioning, when we are in the right spiritual positioning, and that man has good intentions, he will see you for the beautiful woman of God that you are. And it doesn't amount to sex first and foremost. That doesn't even cross his mind until after y'all get married and he comes to know you. Spiritually, she was in a place and position. Doesn't mean that Leah wasn't, but it also shows us the plan that God had, Yahweh had for us by way of these people. Poor Jacob.
That's
He
good.
said, yeah, he
That's
had a plan.
good. And
Yeah.
and just for a second, we need to understand that as women, you know, they which is what we're taught. He saw her working. She was coming there with her father's
Working.
sheep. She was working. Didn't
Mhm.
say nothing about what Leah was doing because it wasn't about Leah at the time. We don't know what she was doing, but we know that when he first encountered
Mhm.
Raquel, she was working. They were like, we waiting for her. She comes with her
Yeah.
father's sheep,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so it wasn't about him checking out her body. Now she was beautiful, but it
Mhm.
wasn't about all of that. When he first encounters her, she's working. She's operating in her purpose and what she is called and destined to do. So a lot of times we get that part twisted when they come approaching us because of we're beautiful and they think we're beautiful and we're fine
Mhm.
and all of that. We need to understand that that's backwards. That's not the way it's supposed to be.
Exactly. Exactly. You're right. And he recognized her operating in her purpose, but he was just beginning to come into his purpose by leaving his mom's house and coming to be there with his uncle. His purpose actually was ignited the moment that his oxytocin level went off the charts when he laid eyes on Rachel. That day he became a man. The Holy Writ doesn't tell us that, but that's the day he really became a man. See, when we go back and we look, Esau was like, as soon as my father take his last breath, I'm taking this brother out because he has stolen my birthright. No, 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 son. I do believe that you asked for the bowl of beans because you're about to die because you've been out in the field and you sold your birthright that didn't mean anything to you, but meant everything to Jacob. See, he was coming into purpose. And so the moment that he laid eyes on Rachel, when he saw Raquel, he was like, I have to have her. But most important, that oxytocin level was off the charts, off the chains, off the roof. And he recognized that he was coming into manhood. See, not only finding us in the right spiritual position, but when a man is entering into or has entered into his manhood, his spiritual positioning, his purpose, he will recognize your purpose. Period. Oxytocin levels meet in a very positive manner. So Laban said, yeah, you can marry her. No problem. It was nothing. Each day was nothing. He worked the 7 years. It was as nothing, 7 long years. And every day, all he can think about is one day it's going to be you and I. One day it's just going to be us and you'll be my wife. Just 7 years. That's how beautiful she was to him. That's how gorgeous she was. That's how fine. Listen, a brother will wait for you. He will wait. He waited. It's in your Bible. He waited. Then it comes time for the celebration. I think one of this is where I'm going to be able to share this, and then we're going to have to cut it off there because I see where our time is. But I want to at least introduce this. And it came time for the celebration of the marriage. And Jacob is excited because he's finally going to have his wife. He has worked hard for 7 years. He has not complained. He has not taken a day off. He has not complained. He's not taken a day off. He's continued to communicate with her. He has made known his intentions to her, but he's been kind. He's been a gentleman. He's been sweet. He's been oxytocin out. I just have to have her. She's all mine. I have to have her. And then they celebrate it and they go into the bed chambers. And he knew who he thought was Rachel. He solidified and sealed the deal. See, the relationship that became a marital relationship wasn't because they celebrated and danced and drank and celebrate the consummation of the marriage. The actual marriage happened when they had sex. Why am I saying that? because oftentimes we don't recognize our oxytocin levels are out of sync. The way Yahweh meant for it to be is out of sync because we've had sex with too many men outside of the marital bed. Let me say that again. We've had sex too many times outside of the marital bed with men who are not our husbands, never were intended to be our husbands. And many of us have forgotten about them and never went to apologize to Yahweh or ask for forgiveness or repented. We just said, well, okay, let's move right along. I'm gonna get over my hurt, take a drink, move on, pray about it, cry about it, move on. That's a problem. So there's no space for the true level of oxytocin on a level of love and respect and friendship and relationship to flow or to connect because we've been too busy. That part. He wakes up the next morning. Oh my God, it's Leah. It's Leah. 7 years Jacob has worked, and he finds out that he ends up with Leah and not Rachel. He is highly upset. His oxytocin level that was up there and off the charts has gone down to nothing. On the flip side of that, Leah begins to experience oxytocin by way of rejection. Because even though the scripture doesn't say it, I can guarantee you Jacob with his handsome self, Leah was digging on him. It just doesn't tell you that. So she was rejected. She was happy to know that she was finally going to do something more than her sister finally was going to be noticed because she was getting married first because by right, that's what it was supposed to be. And the father had special care for his daughter because, she wasn't as beautiful as Rachel. So he wanted to make sure that she was taken care of. But Jacob wasn't happy. And he made sure that everyone knew about it, including Leah. I'm going to stop right there. I don't want to mess it up.
Oh, that's good. That's so good. That's so good because we'll get into the rejection and yeah, and that's the part that I have been studying is the rejection part of it. So much so that even the children felt
Yes,
her rejection and the hatred that he had for Leah. And it took me a minute to realize that because there is one verse, I think it's 29, that says, and he loved Raquel more than he loved Leah. And so that was, and when I was studying that the first couple times, because I was wondering why Yahweh had me kept studying this and to look at the relationships, look at it. And I kept studying it. And I'm like, why do you keep having me study this? But for the longest, as I was studying this, when it says, and he loved Raquel more than he loved Leah, there was part of me that was like, well, see, yeah, he there was a little bit of love that he had for Raquel, for Leah, because it says it right there. It's
This is my new writing, huh? It's in the writing.
He keeps sleeping with her. There's a little bit of love. And
it's the oxytocin.
Right. It's the oxytocin, right?
Yeah.
And so as I study this, and then we're going to pick it up next week. As I study this, I love Yahweh so because in my studying, I cross-reference. And in my cross-referencing, because that next verse talks about the hatred for Leah.
Yep.
And so in my cross-referencing, it takes me to a part in the Torah that talks about if a woman is hated.
Yes.
And she had and her children. And how that firstborn son should be handled in all of this. If he has two wives, that's help. Thank you, Holy Spirit. If he has two wives and one of them is hated and they have children, the one that is hated that has that first son gets the birthright. Right. And it says that he is that man's strength. And then I said, wow. And then when you go to Genesis 49, when Jacob begins to give the prophecies of his son, and when he talks about Reuben, his firstborn by Leah, he talks about you are my strength. And I said, wow. But he forfeited his birthright because he went up to his father's bed and slept with him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, his
Mm-hmm.
the Bilal, whatever her name was.
Mm-hmm.
But right then, it was my confirmation, even though it was in the next verse that he hated. I had a little bit of hope for Leah. I was trying to give her a little bit, just a little bit. But I had to come to the realization that, he hated her. They hated her. You can imagine Raquel hated her because you knew I was digging on him.
Yeah.
You knew I liked him. You saw us chopping it up. You saw us up under that palm tree trying to get some shade, and he all up in my ear and we talking. You know all of that. You know all of that. Daddy gave you my man because you the oldest, you know, you are what you are. You know, I don't want to call her ugly because I really don't believe she was ugly, but she wasn't as beautiful as Raquel. You got my man, you with him, and now you know you get to sleep with him, and you done slept with him, and he thought it was me.
Yes.
You know, girl is hated. And then as we go on, when she had that first baby, it's proof. All she ever wanted was his love. She knew that he didn't love her.
Yep, she knew it, and you can imagine how painful that is to be
and
with
that
a man.
oxytocin is going because she tried her best, but I'm gonna leave it right. I'm gonna leave it right there. So what I need you guys to do, like Dr. Matthis said, I want you to go back and revisit this story with me.
Yes.
Genesis 29. Read it out. Study it well. Study it with me because I'm in there and I'm asking Yahweh to open up all the nuances, all of the hidden things that we might not have known, but he'll show us if we ask us. And I want you to see, Dr. Matthis is going to help us to see how that oxytocin was at play in each one of these characters, Yaakov, Leah, and Raquel.
Yes.
All right. So I want to thank you so much for being here with us this evening, Dr. Matthis, as usual. Thank you so much
for having me. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm so appreciative. You've given us so much to consider, to think about, from the garden and the adultery that happened in the garden. If you wasn't here, you got to go back and listen to the
replay.
Back down to the oxytocin that was going on between Yaakov, Leah, and Raquel. And next week, when we come back, we will pick up this series on oxytocin and dive more into the situationship.
Yes.
The marriage of Yaakov, Leah, and Raquel. And don't forget, it was some other women thrown in there too because of oxytocin, right?
Yep.
So remember, meet us here. Let's talk about it with Wanda every Sunday, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 6 p.m. Central, and 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we have discussions about mind, body, and soul, business, relationship, and the Bible, and sometimes some hair care. But we have amazing conversations, and we want you to have those conversations with us. So until then, have a wonderful week. Remember, study Genesis 29, and we'll meet you right back here next Sunday, 4 p.m., for the continued series and discussion on oxytocin. Have a wonderful week. Take care and